Again, I can't thank you enough for being here. I mean, seriously, there are a lot of other things you could be doing, a lot of other places you could be, and you've chosen to be here. And again, let me mention, I know that this is not a popular or pleasant kind of thing to be talking about, but the reality is we do need to deal with it. Let me introduce you to Murray City, Tennessee. I did not mispronounce that. As a matter of fact, you can go on the internet. Wikipedia, I think, is where this is, where you can look that city up, and what it will say is it will say Murray City, Tennessee, parenthesis, pronounced by the locals, Murray City, phonetically spelled M-U-R-R-Y. If you don't pronounce it right in the presence of somebody who lives there, they will correct you, okay? I'm warning you, if you ever visit Crockett County, Tennessee. Crockett County, Tennessee is a county of 14,600 people. The entire county is 14,600 people. I can't help but remember about Hee Haw. And remember that segment they used to have sometimes where they would identify a city and they would do it maybe something like this. Murray City, Tennessee, population 650. Salute. A little community of 650 people. It is a county that is entirely agricultural. It's known for cotton and soybeans, and they're farmers. No self-respecting farmer in Crockett County would sell an acre of his land to a contractor to build a house, because that county is all about the agriculture. If you know anything about Tennessee and you're aware of that distance between Nashville and Memphis, Jackson is the large city between Nashville and Memphis, closer to Memphis than Nashville. But Jackson, I live 30 minutes north of Jackson, Tennessee, in Crockett County, Tennessee, and it's called Murray City, Tennessee. When we're born into this world, we are so cute. Some of us, over the years, lose our cuteness. Some of us morph into downright ugly, okay? Let's just be honest, okay? Let's be honest about it. But I could just pat that little rear end in that picture. That is such a neat picture. I've never seen an ugly baby. It's just a beautiful thing, isn't it? To experience birth and for a child to be born into this world, it's such a neat thing. A lot of responsibility, but it's such a neat experience. What kind of world, let's think out loud together here for a little bit. What kind of world is this beautiful baby born into?
Wicked.
What?
Wicked.
Wicked, okay. 1 John 5:9 says, the whole world lies under the sway of the wicked one. Okay? What kind of world is this child born into?
A beautiful world.
A beautiful, and it is beautiful, isn't it? It is a beautiful world. Back in February, I was in Alamosa, Colorado, doing a widowhood workshop. That's another unique place on the face of God's green earth, over 7,000 feet above sea level, between mountains. It is, on the internet, again, which always gives you the truth, it is, quote, the coldest city in the contiguous United States, unquote. That's not in Michigan, it's not in Minnesota, it's not in South Dakota, it's in Alamosa, Colorado. 7,000 feet above sea level. And that is an amazing place. That's a beautiful place. Oh, wow. It is so different than Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee. We do live in a beautiful world. We do live. It's a wicked world. It's a beautiful world. What else can you tell me about the world?
Painful.
It's a painful world. It can be a painful world, can it be? Yeah. Just like there is great joy, there's also great pain in the world. What else can you tell me about the world? It's a fallen world. It's a fallen world.
It's God's creation.
It's God's creation. And that's why it's a beautiful world. But it's kind of like that line in The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy said to Toto, We are not in Kansas anymore. We're not in Eden. We're not in the Garden of Eden. We're in a fallen world where there are random, inexplicable things that happen. I want you to think about this for a minute. And, you know, there's some things that I think, there's some things that are often said that I just think sometimes it'd be good for us to put our heads together and think out loud together about them and maybe reframe our thinking or rephrase how we say certain things. I have heard people say, everything happens for a reason. Man, I can't go there. Ain't no way I'd try to defend that one. You have any idea why would people say that?
Give them comfort.
Okay. What is it about that gives them comfort? Because what does that indicate?
They have no control over what's happening.
What's the relationship between that observation and the question why?
No answer.
Okay, yeah, they're trying to come up with an answer, and they figure that's a good answer. Everything happens for a reason.
They want life to make sense.
Yeah. Again, it's that figure it out thing. You know, it's almost like it's God's not to blame, but it's almost like us being genetically programmed. Like we got to figure this out. So one way of figuring it out is we just say everything happens for a reason. You tell that to a young parent who's lost their baby. You tell that to Jennifer, who left the East Liverpool, Ohio area with her husband and very young child. I think the child was in the neighborhood of maybe 3 years old. And they were driving from East Liverpool, Ohio, which is maybe an hour west of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but across the river and in the right state. They left their home and they went down to the outlets in another location. And they get there late. And they have this accident. And when she wakes up eventually in the hospital, her father has to tell her that she has lost her husband and her child. Everything happens for a reason. Jennifer's an amazing young lady. Amazing young lady. She's remarried now. She has an adorable daughter whose name is Lauren. Just a wonderful young lady. She's a survivor, some way, somehow. But you talk about a gal who has not wasted her pain. She has like a ministry called Haley's Hugs. Haley was the name of the daughter that she lost. And she has this ministry called Haley's Hugs. And it's really a neat thing that she's doing. She's taking her loss, her pain, and she is using it for the glory of God and trying to be a blessing to others. But we want an answer, don't we? We want an answer to what we think is the $1 million question. And so that's what some people have decided. They've concluded everything happens for a reason. Well, let me suggest that we think about this image for a minute. What does this image tell you about life? I think there are a few things, but you look at this image. What does this image tell you about life? What? It's a balancing act, okay? Anybody else? What's this tell you about? More blessings than burdens. Why do you come to that conclusion looking at that image? More blessings than burdens. What gives you that impression?
Because it's lower, it's heavier.
Okay, so it looks like, okay. Anything else about life from that picture?
It's going to be an ebb and flow.
Yeah, there's going to be a teetering, maybe. Let me ask you. We spent some time in Job last evening. Job made the remark in Job 14:1. He said, "Man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble." think about that statement? Again, listen carefully. Man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. Is that truth or not truth? Because you got to remember there are lies in the Bible. Remember the serpent said, "You'll not surely die." That's a lie. But it's in the Bible. What about that statement, man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble? Is that true or not true?
Certainly how I felt at the time.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, that's how he was feeling at that moment.
Oh, bing, 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 bing. That's how he was feeling at the moment. But is that true? Are your feelings always reality?
No, feelings can be dangerous.
Oh, yeah. By the way, if you want to read a good book about that, Can We Trust Our Emotions? James Dobson. James Dobson has written some great books. And he has a ministry out in Colorado Springs. When I was out in Alamosa, Colorado, I had a chance to visit that ministry out there in Colorado Springs. A great place to visit. But he's done a lot of wonderful things, written a lot of wonderful things. That book, Can We Trust Our Emotions, is a good book. I can save you the price of that book because the answer to the question is no. Okay? Can you trust your emotions? The answer is no. Okay? That's what he basically says. But it's worth reading. It's a good book. But that's how Job was feeling. But is that reality? Man that is born of woman. Okay, now let's break it down. Man that is born of woman. Is that part true?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, duh. How else? How else are you going to get here? Okay, we're born of woman. Man that is born of woman is a few days. What about that part?
Life is short. Life is short.
Right. Compared to what? Because, man, I've met people, I mean, no offense to anybody here, I met people who are like 100, 104.
But compared to eternity, that's nothing.
Oh, compared to eternity, that's nothing. Psalm 90 and verse 10 talks about 70 years, if by reason of strength, 80 years. No matter how long you live, it's a short period of time compared to eternity. And isn't what is most important how God looks at something, not necessarily how we look at something? You know, I was driving in Jackson, Tennessee one day, and I was listening on the radio to this denominational preacher. And he defined wisdom in a way I'd never heard before. And thought it was really interesting. You know, I'd always thought of wisdom, you know, typically like we do. That's, you know, when you use your knowledge in a very appropriate and right way. Here's what he said. He said, wisdom is when you see something the way God sees it. And I thought about that. I'd never heard that expression before, and I thought, that's good. When you see something from God's perspective. When you see marriage from God's perspective, you've got wisdom about that subject. When you see family from God's perspective, then you've got wisdom about that. When you see the church, the Bible, from God's perspective, you've got wisdom about those subjects. When you see life from God's perspective, you've got wisdom about life. It's good for us to look at life as God looks at life. And the reality is, it is few days. It is no matter how long you live. You know, sometimes we talk about a person who has suffered with a disease for years. And we talk about that as a long time. But then a baby dies early, very early, maybe even before they leave the hospital. That's a really, really short time, isn't it? One of the things that frames our perspective about those things is the circumstances. Suffering, for instance. If you suffer with a disease for years, 8.5 years is, you know how quickly life, moves. And life's going forward, whether or not we are or not, time is going forward. Well, what's going on in the setting or circumstances has a way of affecting whether we talk about it as short or long. Well, the reality is, in life, we have a short period of time here. No matter how long, it's just a short period of time, because everything needs to be looked at from an eternal perspective. Okay? Man that is born of woman, okay, right, is a few days, right, and full of trouble. Is that right?
Yes. Because life's not perfect.
Because life's not perfect, okay? Anybody else? Man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. What about the full of trouble part?
Sin has entered the picture.
Say that again?
Sin.
Sin?
But we live in a fallen
Okay.
world, so that's troubling.
Okay. And there's a lot of collateral damage from sin, isn't there? You know, an individual, you take for instance a child who has become very selfish. And you take a selfish child, their behavior, you know, they can become an incorrigible delinquent and ruin the tranquility and blessing of family. I mean, they can just bring that family down. They can drag that family through ruin by their choice. They're in the wrong, but look at the collateral damage. You know, how that affects the parents and any siblings or grandparents. There's sin in the world, and there's a lot of collateral damage as a result of the sin. We're not guilty of other people's sins, but we can sure be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and related sometimes, it seems like, to the wrong people. And we can find ourselves having to deal with the consequences of other people's sin. So, yeah, life can be cruel. You know, we talk about life being unfair. Man, let's go another step. Life can be brutal. I mean, so unfair that it is callous and it is brutal and it can cause horrific pain. Now, how can you reconcile full of trouble with that picture, that graphic, with the blessings and the burdens? Because we said that there's more blessings. We said one thing we noticed is that would indicate there are more blessings than there are burdens. How do you get that to be consistent with the full of trouble? Why did he say full of trouble? What was he going through? Trouble. How much trouble? A lot. And that's the way he felt. Like Mark suggested, that is the way he felt.
But it depends on us and how we react to that trouble, whether it's weighing us down or whether it's lighter for us.
Oh yeah, that is so true. We have a choice about how to deal with it. What was happening to him in his life? Remember, and we're going in the next session, what we're going to talk about is the effect of loss. You know, how it really can blow us away and the impact it can have on our lives. Well, what impact was it having on him? Man, it was crushing him. I mean, he is an awesome sufferer. A great, exemplary, persevering person of faith. But there were times that he felt just so overwhelmed that all he could see was his burdens. Did he have any blessings? When he said that in Job 14:1, did he have any blessings? What blessings did he have? He said, I mean, if something is full, it's full. He said, man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. So that doesn't leave much room for blessings. Did he have any blessings?
He had his life.
He had his life. He was still living, wasn't he? His heart was still beating. The blood was still coursing through his veins. So he was blessed that he was still alive. Okay, what other blessings did he have?
The love of God.
He had the Lord. And remember, in the first part of that story, there's no question but that he had a great relationship with the Lord. He was fully devoted to the Lord. Had the Lord left him? Did he still have the Lord? Well, sure he did. What's the best blessing you could possibly have in life? A relationship with the Lord. And he had that. But he said full of trouble. Did he have any other blessings? Can you think of any other blessings? He had his life. He had his relationship with the Lord. Yeah, he had friends, didn't he? He had some friends that didn't show up, no doubt. I mean, I'm sure his social network was larger than 3. I'm hoping he had a few females in that group. You all can be a little bit, notice I threw out the you all thing. That's what happens to a Yankee if you get down below the Mason-Dixon line and you stay there very long. You all know how this is. You know, this thing that we experience, this life that we experience, it can really have an impact on us. And frankly, women have a tendency to be more compassionate. They're more nurturing and they're more compassionate. And I'm sure he had some female friends, you know, as well as those 3 male friends.
Well, he had a wife.
He still had a wife, didn't he? Now, what did he lose in that life with his wife, though?
His family.
Well, he lost his family, but it appears he lost the support of his wife. Remember his wife? Yeah, in chapter 2, she says, man, just curse God and die. You know, let's close this sucker out. Is this being recorded? Okay. Man, he was really burdened, wasn't he? But he had blessings, didn't he? In your worst experiences of life, what do you still got? You still got blessings. But, man, sometimes it's hard to see the blessings, isn't it? You are so troubled and you are so burdened that your vision is warped and you just can't see the blessings. And you know what? That's okay, because that's human. For a time, that's okay. You know, sometimes pain and agony can be very beneficial. It's like, I've always said that a person, especially in regard to orthopedic surgeries, a person is prepared for an orthopedic surgery when they don't want to live one more day like they've been living. Then you're psychologically prepared for what you're going to experience. The great thing about post-surgical pain that makes it different from the pre-surgical pain is that the post-surgical pain, at least by design, has an end. Okay? It has a beginning, post-surgery, but it also has an end, because that's the point of the surgery. This difficulty we have of seeing our blessings when we're so crushed by the weight and the quantity of the burdens, this problem that we have, it's temporary. It's, you know, just hang on, just hang on. If Job could get to that point where he would make that statement, Job, you know, he's not normal. He's way above normal, okay? If a way above normal fella could get to that point in his life, I wouldn't be too surprised if we might find ourselves that way. Or we might find some of our very good friends, our brothers and sisters in Christ, with that kind of struggle in their life. That is how strongly we can be impacted by loss. It can cause us to lose our vision and perspective about life. But hopefully that's a temporary thing. It's a phase that we're going through, and we just have to keep surviving through that phase till we get our sight back. So it really is. Here's the way my daughter used to hashtag it. For those of you who know about that kind of thing on Facebook, she used to hashtag blessed beyond measure. Hashtag blessed beyond measure. When I got on Facebook, which didn't happen until my wife passed away, a lot of people poke fun at me because of what I said about Facebook previous to that. But when I got on Facebook, I decided to one-up my daughter. She would hashtag often, blessed beyond measure. And then when I got on Facebook, here's what I did. I said, blessed beyond both merit and measure. I'm not only blessed beyond measure, I'm blessed beyond anything I deserve. Blessed beyond both merit and measure. We are richly, richly blessed. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, though. Sometimes it just doesn't feel that way. But we're human, and our emotions are not always consistent with reality. That is the reason why we struggle with loss. Even Ralphie had enough sense not to do this. But his friend, I'm sure his friend had no intention of getting his tongue stuck to the pole. Really. I really don't think he did that with intention. But it happened. He got attached to the pole. And if you remember that movie, man, was that chaos. I mean, the whole community and the parents and the gathering there at that scene. It was a lot of stress. And I just love Ralphie's face. You can tell, man, he's wanting to do this too. We in life, we get attached to things. Sometimes we get attached to things not by intention. It just kind of happens. And then other things we become attached to by choice. Think about love in the most worldly, common, generic way that we talk about love, which is basically about getting attached to stuff. You know, we get attached to stuff. What are some things that we become attached to in life? Some things that we talk about loving.
Ice cream.
Ice cream. Okay, man, it must be a thing with preachers. I love ice cream. What's the name of that ice cream place, Janice, that I went to?
Cooks.
Cooks. Okay, Cooks. Okay, it might be worth the drive from Tennessee to come back up here for Cooks ice cream. Yeah, I mean, you become attached to ice cream. What else do you get attached to?
Our animals.
Our animals, our pets. Okay.
Cars.
Cars. Yeah, cars.
Food.
Sports.
Food, sports, okay. And people, okay. Granddaughters, yeah. I have 4 of them. 1 grandson. I think that was the Lord's way of paying me back for the overdosing with the females. He gave me 1 grandson.
And pets.
And pets, yeah. Again, remember, with some things, we become attached to them because we decide we want that attachment. It's a deliberate choice in our life. There are other things that we just kind of gradually get attached to, not by intention, but it just happens. Okay? Now, what's inevitable is that you're going to lose some stuff that you have become attached to. Yeah. And what's that going to do to you? It's going to do a number on you. That's what it's going to do. It's going to do a number on you. And you're going to have to deal with that reality. Stop and think now about things that we could suffer the loss of that would have an impact on us. Things that we might treasure enough that they would have a real impact on us if we lost them.
Job or a career.
Okay, a job or a career. Let me tell you about Clyde. Clyde worked for Firestone in the corporate office in Akron, Ohio. Used to be the rubber capital of the world. And Clyde worked there for decades. He worked there for 39 years, and he wasn't your average garden variety employee. He was in accounting, very high up in the accounting department, and he was the kind of fella, he would go in, and he didn't have to, he'd go in on Saturdays and he would work. And I don't think it was to get away from his wife. He really liked his job. He really liked, and he'd go in on Saturdays, and he'd work on Saturday. He was a golden employee. They came to him one day. He was a member of the church where I was preaching in Ohio. He came to me one day, and he told me this story. They came to him, and they said, Clyde, we're going to move your job down to Nashville, which happens to be where my wife, or my daughter, my oldest daughter, works at Bridgestone Firestone in the corporate office in Nashville. We're going to move your job down to Nashville. My daughter is also in accounting and worked under and with Clyde up in Akron some. But they said, we're going to move your job down to Akron. And he said, well, I don't want to go to Akron. And they said, we don't want you to go to Akron either. That was his unceremonial release from the company. They were dumping him. Now, this is a 39-year employee whose life, in many ways, was his job. That was his identity. That's where he also had a lot of his self-esteem fed, was by the value and the quality of the work that he did. Now, he's lost his job. You know, we don't think sometimes about that kind of loss and the impact that that could have on a person, especially if that person has wrapped a lot of their identity and their dignity in their mind around that job. Well, here's the rest of the story. It was chaos in Nashville, and my daughter and the people that work under her were affected by Clyde's dismissal. So they started complaining, and this complaining went on so long that finally the people in Akron were driven to go to Clyde and say, Clyde, would you come back and help us out for a while? And he said, ain't no way, Jose, it ain't happening. He was ticked off. He was mad. And he was hurt. He was deeply hurt by what had happened. Well, okay, things are still chaotic down in Nashville. Things are still a mess. And my daughter's telling me about this and all the stress and all the complaints that are surfacing. They go back to Clyde a second time. And here's what Clyde told me. He said, Dean, they said, Clyde, we want you to come back. And what would it take to get you to come back? And Clyde said to me, he said, Dean, I named a number that I knew they would not match. And they matched it. Wow. He goes back for a few months, helps with some training, and he leaves smiling like a Chessy cat. He's good now. He's really good now. Because he was kind of able to leave on his terms. But yeah, he lost. And he was very attached to that job. Very attached. Life doesn't always work out that way, this side of heaven. How about other things that you become attached to that you could lose that could have an impact on your life?
Your home.
Yeah, what about your home? People lose their homes. When you lose your home, what do you lose?
Your shelter, identity,
Shelter, identity in some respects.
memories.
Security. You know, it's a harsh blow. You may lose all your possessions. Okay. What else could you lose of significance in your life?
Health.
Body parts. Body parts. There was a fella whose family, he was not, but his family was members of the church where I was preaching. He worked for a rubber factory. He got his arm caught in a machine. He had to have a significant portion, most of his arm taken off. And he had to live with that reality. He'd lost a body part. There's not just the phantom pain, but then in addition to that, there's the reality of, is he who he was? Imagine that. So you can lose a body part. What else could you lose?
Your health.
Yeah, I was hoping somebody would mention that, your health. Let me tell you about Miss Carolyn Spade. Canton, Ohio. Some of you may even know a daughter of hers, Amy, who came to Michigan Christian College. This family is also well known to the Palmer family, and some of you may know of Gary and Laura Palmer, who worked at Michigan Christian College for a few years. But anyway, Miss Carolyn, I was with her when the doctor told her she had cancer. I went with her and some of her children and her husband. And I heard those words where that news was shared. After the doctor shared that news and before he dismissed himself, I asked for the doctor's permission to stay there in that room for a few moments before we left, because I knew this was a really significant event, not just for Carolyn, but for the whole family. And he graciously consented to let us stay there in that room for a while. And so he left and we stayed and we talked about what we'd heard. It was probably 30 minutes later we'd exited, after we'd had prayer together, we talked about it and had prayer together, we exited the room and took care of things at the desk. And then it was, I don't remember what month it was, but it was cold, it was snowing, and we stepped outside the door of that building. Carolyn's husband has been an alcoholic for decades. Miss Carolyn was the only person in that family that was the stable person of faith. She was a matriarch without equal. I just don't know how in the world she was the person that she was. We stepped outside the building, and her husband, Butch, says, I'll go out and get the truck and I'll bring it up and pick you up. And so he goes out to the parking lot. And she turns to me and says this, about 30 minutes after she's gotten this horrible diagnosis, where she's terminally ill. She said, well, maybe this will bring Butch back. Talking about her husband. Maybe this will bring him back to the Lord. How many people could do that? How many people could suffer that loss of health and 30 minutes later think about how her pain and her loss could be used to inspire something good? Wow. She was amazing. She got her wish, by the way. He came back to the Lord. Yeah. Amazing, amazing turnaround.
It's just too bad it's got to take something like that to do that.
Yeah. You talk about, look at what it cost. Look at what it cost to bring about the gain. But you know what? Well, if I ever see Miss Carolyn up in heaven, I'm sure she'd say, I got a good deal. She lost her health and she died. But it brought her husband back to the Lord. Man, that's faith. That's a beautiful, beautiful, powerful, inspirational story that can be a blessing to others. See, the reality is that when we become attached to things, whether it's intentional or unintentional, when we lose them, it is going to matter to us. And it is going to have an effect on us. And what does it do to us? We're going to talk about that in this next session. What does that do to us when we lose something of significance? Okay. What this does is it throws us into a transition in our life when we suffer a significant loss. There's a book called Transitions, written by William Bridges. I don't know what he is religiously, if he's anything. But it's a great book about transitions. And we experience those in our life, transitions. And with transitions, there is an ending. Something ends. Like Clyde lost his job. Miss Carolyn lost her health. We lose a spouse or a child or a grandchild. There's an ending. And that's brutal. That's a brutal thing to experience. Loss of something that you have valued is a brutal, brutal experience. Now, with every transition, there's an ending. There's a new beginning, though. There's a new beginning. And now that's hopeful, isn't it? That's the hopeful part. Now, the problematic part is the middle part. And that's what William Bridges calls the neutral zone. The neutral zone. And here's the way that I would best picture it graphically. It's kind of like you're in this forest. And this is a weird forest journey experience. Because you see, what you want to do is you want to get to the new beginning. But you're in this forest, and what's weird about this forest is there's no footprints. It's like nobody's ever been here before. There's no pathway. But you want to get to your new beginning. And you'd like to get there like yesterday. But you're in this forest. And there's no pathway, there's no footprint. But you meet people in this forest. It's weird. You meet people in this time of transition. And again, it's kind of like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She meets these people. And some of these people initially are kind of scary. And it's weird, the things that, these people that she meets but you know what? Sometimes she experienced scary times, didn't she? In that forest scene in that movie, I'm surprised we let kids look at that stuff when they were so little. I mean, that is really scary. My youngest daughter refused to let her daughters see that movie until just recently. I mean, her oldest child is like 11 years old now. I mean, come on. She experienced some really scary stuff, didn't she, on her adventure. But she also experienced blessings, didn't she? She enjoyed blessings, and she enjoyed people that were very helpful to her. And there were people who were troubling to her. And that's kind of like when you suffer loss. You meet people that are very helpful to you, very encouraging. Then you meet people who, well, they're in a different category. I challenge you sometime to Google something like ridiculous things people say to folks who have lost loved ones. Oh my. We don't have time. We don't have time. I've got that list, but I didn't bring it. I intentionally did not bring it because I knew we wouldn't have enough time. There are some classically stupid things that people say. It's just, and some of these things, take into consideration some of what we talked about last night. Somebody, for instance, saying at the casket, well, it must have been God's will. How is that going to be interpreted by the hearer? Now, no matter what the person, you got to remember, communicating is one of the hardest things we human beings do. To get something out of your head accurately, out your mouth and into the brain of another person is an extremely difficult challenge. It is so difficult. When people say it must have been God's will, when somebody has suffered loss, what is the conclusion typically of the hearer, you think?
That I did
God
something
heard
wrong.
us.
That I did something wrong.
Okay, I did something wrong?
Doesn't like me.
God doesn't like me?
Yeah.
Okay.
God really doesn't love anybody.
Okay. God did this? A lot of people will draw that conclusion. In other words, God. And so what is that going to do in regard to their view of God? Whew. Imagine the rehabilitation, the mental and spiritual rehabilitation is going to be necessary if a person comes to that conclusion. Remember what we said, not everything that happens in this world is God's will. In the sense, and I mean God's will in the sense of His desire, His preference, what He would choose. Not everything that happens in this world is God's will, but in everything that happens, God has a will. And God's will consistently, whether you're talking about prosperity or adversity, is that He's glorified and we be a blessing to others. And that, in a nutshell, is what life is all about. Well, sometimes people in this forest don't have a clue. And sometimes they'll say things that'll be difficult for us to hear. And they may do things that are difficult for us to experience. But, thank the Lord, we're blessed with, hopefully, wonderful people, too, that really, they have a level of appreciation for the struggle. And they provide great help and great comfort. See, that's where we need to take our pain, turn it into our inspiration. Don't waste your pain and use it to glorify God and to be a blessing to others. Be the kind of person that's helpful, not the kind of person who hinders a person in their forest experience. The best way I can describe this forest in regard to grief is have you ever been in a maze, in a corn maze? Here's the way I would envision this. This forest is weird in many respects. Again, no pathway, no footprints, but yet there are people there that we meet occasionally. And it's kind of like you're running a cross-country event in a maze. And there's all kinds of weather and all kinds of ups and downs that you're experiencing, but you're in this maze and you can't get out. You just keep running. And you keep running, and you keep running, and you can't find how to get out of this maze. in this forest to the new beginning. But man, you sure want to get there. You sure want to get to the new beginning because you have suffered so intensely that you are so desirous of this new beginning, but yet you're in the forest. Now, how long is a person after their loss going to be in this forest?
Depends on them.
Depends on them. What else does it depend on? God. What else does it depend on?
The help that comes their way.
The help that they get. Okay. What else might affect how long?
Well, don't they have to want to get to that new beginning?
Yeah, you have to desire, because there are times that you can drown. You can drown in your grief. You can drown in the aftermath of your loss. And you know, your heart may still beat, the blood still may course through your brain, through your veins, but you're eventually dead. Essentially, as far as real life and value, you're dead. One of the, again, the number one motto, I shared with you the second one, don't waste your pain. The number one motto of the Widowhood Workshop Ministry is don't die until you're dead. Don't die until you're dead. Some people, when they suffer loss, they die with the person they bury. It happens. I had one widow one time tell me that she warned this friend of hers beforehand. She said, at the cemetery, if I try to jump into that hole, stop me. Please stop me. You know, after you've experienced loss, you may feel dead. You may want to be dead. But you're still alive. But what that life is like, that's your choice. That's your reaction part. And it can be different, and it can be difficult trying to live life after loss, because the choice may be that you die. You decide to die before you're dead. Yeah.
Well, he would have to come out of the victim mentality and go into the victor mentality.
Yeah, get out of the victim mentality into a victor mortality.
You're not in that position at that time because I think of it as like, and I hate to say it as a disease, but you have to go through healing.
Yeah.
To heal your emotional, physical, and spiritual self.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do that without God, and you really need a lot of help to do that.
Yeah. Takes a lot of work, doesn't it? There's a thing called grief work. It's one of the dumb things that we say is time heals all wounds. That's a lie. Time with effective grief work can heal a lot of wounds, but the scars are still there. And you've got, because the rest of your life, you know, you're going to be scarred by that loss, but how you decide to handle that, it's like, you know, you can't, it's the gift that life gave you that you don't want, but you've got to live with, and you've got to decide how are you going to live. How are you going to live with the loss of that limb? How are you going to live with that scar on your face? Literal scar on, you've got to, how are you going to deal with that? And that's the reaction part. But it is extremely difficult to deal with that. William Bridges calls this the neutral zone. The neutral zone. And there's